Our schedule calls for a few introductory remarks. I'm going to make those, and then I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague here, Doug Ray. And what I will do is just give you a bit of a sense of the nature of our course and what we have covered so far, and say a few words about our own engagement with the question of religion and violence in the context of globalization processes. I know that you've had also a unit on fundamentalism and extremism, and we'd be very interested in hearing content of your discussions on those issues. Can you hear me well? Up, down, yes? Excellent. I think we are moving. So first, brief summary. Our own course here on faith and globalization is roughly divided in two parts. First part is kind of general considerations in which we have examined significance of globalization and globalization processes, and also its impact on the world of faiths. And then we looked at the couplet, faith and globalization, from other side, significance of faiths today, and also their possible impact upon globalization processes. So after this general study of the relationship between the two, we started going into specific areas, such as issues that concern business, human rights, gender issues, and so forth. And we are right now in the section dealing with faith and reconciliation, faith and violence. So roughly that's where we are in our course. And during this course, we have been pursuing kind of two fundamental issues. One of these fundamental issues were kind of the accounts, the sense of the self, of social relations, and the good that are encoded in the great faith traditions, and also that shape globalization processes. We've also talked about roles of faith in generating violence in the world today, as well as being potential sources for more harmonious relationships. And right now we are on generation of violence, part of our series of reflections. And this idea of association between faith and violence, of course, is significant in the context of globalization, because globalization creates an interconnected and interdependent world, whereas religions often serve to ground, to legitimize, strengthen particular identities, and these two things often are in conflict with one another. And today, conflicts are justified more in religious terms and legitimized more in religious terms than in terms of ideology. And this is a significant problem in an interdependent world. So, but what is precisely the link, I think we have to ask, between religion and contemporary violence? And what we've done in the course of our reflections in this seminar is to ask the question whether religion is the main factor, proxy for something else. Those will be two opposing positions, or one of the factors. And the phrase that I have used is, in this regard, is that all monocausal explanations are suspect. So religion is one possible reasons and causes of violence, but certainly not the only one, and maybe also not the most important one, and certainly not the most important one in all of the particular instances. And now we are returning to this question, from a slightly different angle, and asking the questions: are faiths by nature violent, as some suggest? And if not, under what conditions do they turn and become violent? So the character of faiths themselves, and also conditions under which faiths become violent. So let me address very briefly these questions. So are faiths by nature violent? In popular presentations today, such as Christopher Hitchens' a book, God is Not Great, or similar books, often religion is portrayed as inherently violent. he has a little phrase which says simply, religion kills. And in his account, religion kills because religion is a form of mental delusion, is a form of bad conscience, form of untruth. And not just that it is form of mental delusion, but also a great moral evil. Now, we haven't read Hitchens' text or any of such texts. I consider them kind of fundamentalist atheists, forms of fundamentalist atheism, rather flat, but nonetheless very influential today. What we've instead done, and we've shared these readings with you, is we've read Juergensmeyer's book, or sections of that book, who develops a bit more sophisticated thesis and suggests that there is kind of ambivalence of religion, a religion containing deep within its own character seeds of violence, as well as at the same time seeds of peace. And he suggests that religious imagination always has had propensity to absolutize and to project images of cosmic war. That's not part of the reading, in part of the reading that we had assigned, but toward the end of the book he offers this kind of a summary. At the same time, he suggests also every religious tradition has projected images of tranquility and of peace. And so his suggestion is that religion is important because it gives spirit to public life and provides a kind of a beacon of moral order. Yet at the same time, it needs to be tempered. It needs to be tempered by rationality and fair play that for him derives primarily from Enlightenment convictions. So in Juergensmeyer, you have this ambivalence of religion. We've read also Girard. And for Girard, René Girard, the famous theorist of religion, religions are always response to already present violence. And the reason for that violence is what he calls mimetic desire and mimetic rivalry. That mimetic rivalry is the foundational character of human behavior, and religions are designed in many ways to mitigate against violence that is existent in societies, and they do so in different ways through ritual, which mimics scapegoating and resolve mimetic crisis, as he said, and some religions, notably he suggests Judaism and Christianity, expose the scapegoating mechanism and in such way function to reduce violence. We have also mentioned briefly not in our readings, but in our discussions, the thesis of David Martin, who was professor of sociology at the London School of Economics, who suggests that that each of the religious tradition has a repertoire of ideas, and depending on how these repertoire, which portions of the repertoire are played, religions can be either violent or contribute to peace. And that then leads to if that's the case, that leads to the question, under what conditions do faiths become violent? Now, I think that we have to distinguish, and it may be interesting for us to discuss, we have to distinguish between external and internal conditions on which religions become violent, right? We haven't done much in our readings about those external conditions under which religions become violent. And I would want to suggest that those external conditions are often associated, the religions become violent when they are associated, when specific religions are associated with political power. And second, when they're associated with holy space. So I think kind of regulating the space and political power and the function of religions in these kinds of settings, they often then become and contribute to become violent and contribute to generating violence. So association of religion with political power, power which needs to be legitimized and power which needs to be defended, that is, say, as distinct from secular reading of power, understanding of power, and religion more as a private affair, or as distinct from a political power which is being disassociated from any particular religion, but all forms of religiosity present in the political space can shape that exercise of that power. Or when you think about holy space, where identity of religion and of people embracing religion is tightly connected with particular geographic locales or particular architecture, to use a very neutral term, holy object and holy sites. And that's as distinct from religion being highly portable, all right? Some forms of Buddhism are such, some forms of Christianity, Pentecostalism are such, or religions as having actually nothing like holy sites. Early Christians met in house churches. Any house could do, and so there was no tying of religion to a particular holy space. So that's a kind of external condition, political association with political power, association with holy space. For readings today, we have primarily concentrated on internal conditions of the religion itself, and those internal conditions, especially in the readings that we've had, they concerned the absolute truth claims of religion, and these absolute truth claims. The question is, the issue is whether the fact that, or at least the claim that religions make absolute truth claims, whether that as such is already violence generating. So that would be the claim about the nature of religious language or possible form that religious language takes. And I think that may be a significant issue for us to discuss. We have also spent quite a bit of time in our class talking about religious exclusivism and whether the fact that many religions are exclusivist. By this, I suppose we mean that many of religions claim that they are, if not the only, then at least the most truthful and best ways of getting in contact with the divine, whether that claim itself is already such that generates violence. I think it may be good for us to pick up these two, I think, very related questions of religious exclusivism and question of the character of religious truth claims, and then see to what extent they themselves are generative of violence. Now, one can, just as a suggestion, one may distinguish between the way in which religious truths are held, right? The certain level of certainty, or to put it paradoxically, almost level of absoluteness with which they are held, right? And the content of what these claims, the content of these claims. And these are two distinct issues, right? Is it the case that the way in which religious claims are held, the amount of certitude that is violence generating, or is it the actual content of those claims? Or might it be some combination of both that contributes to violence? In the course of our discussions early on, we have, especially Professor Blair, has referred to what can be described as a distinction between thick religiosity and thin religiosity. Religiosity which has depth, and religiosity which is a kind of like sacred canopy over social processes that go on in any case. And thick religiosity would be religiosity which has robust moral vision embedded in it. Again, moral vision about the self, about social relations, about the good. And it's part of an overarching interpretation of life that has that and not just a sense of connection with transcendence, and that engages over periods of time in traditions of argument about these issues. Right? So it's a thick in the sense that it has depth, rather than thick in the sense that it's very zealous. You can have a very thick religiosity and unzealous religiosity. You can have very thin religiosity, which can be very zealous, right? Thin religiosity, on the other hand, discards moral vision and discards the tradition, long tradition of moral reasoning within religions, but retains this sense of ultimacy, sense of sacredness, and often then shrouds what are worldly, so to speak, causes in the aura of the sacred. And the thesis has been propounded that religion tends to be more violent when it's thin religiosity in the sense that was defined here, rather than when it's this thick religiosity. That is when religions serve simply to legitimize and to energize causes, ideas, programs that derive its content from other sources than religion itself, rather than when religions define the moral universe in which people ought to behave. Now, that's also a very controversial thesis, if I have managed to explain it adequately to you, and it would be a matter of maybe interesting discussion that we might have. I think I'm going to stop right here and pass on to my colleague, Professor Wright.